for taking the time to tune in and hear about this Macomb Township book recently published by Arcadia Publishing as part of their Images of America series. They've done approximately 14,000 of these type of books all over the country. So there is one about a little bit of something of everything. I would like to thank Kate Brown from the Clinton-Macomb Library for suggesting this book meeting, and also the great folks of the Macomb Township Historical Commission for their unending help throughout this process of getting this book to the public. And as it states, the book's acknowledgments, writing a book like this is something you don't pull off alone. A lot of interested and helpful people were there to help me find the answers and break down the brick walls that sometimes would be there. I will always be grateful for them for that.
Thank you. All right, I'm gonna share my screen and I'm gonna be running the PowerPoint.
Okay.
There we go. If anyone is not seeing that, let me know, because you should be. Slideshow from beginning. Can you see that, Linda?
I can see it.
Looks beautiful. Okay. I was very surprised when you mentioned where this photo was taken.
I'm going to show some images, some from the Macomb book and some that didn't make it into the final cut. You're going to hear stories that tell about farms and family life on streets we know today as 20 Mile through 26 Mile. These roads were and still sometimes called M59, Hall Road, or Rosso Highway. 21 Mile was originally known as Shoemaker Road. 22 Mile was Waldenberg Road, and 23 Mile east of Romeo Plank was Whiskey Road, and west of Romeo Plank, Coldwater Road. And this is where I found the story of Mr. John Miller. He had a 95-acre farm on 23 Mile in the southwest corner of Card Road. According to Mr. Miller, the reason the names were split up was on his side of the road on 23 Mile, they would drink whiskey. On the north side, they would drink water. And he said that if they drank the water, that was fine, but that if they heard about the whiskey, they'd want to move there. Mr. Miller was 99 years old when he repeated for the local news article, but he also added, I don't want them moving to my side of the road. We also have 24 Mile Road as French Road, 25 Mile as Arnold Road or Runyon Road, and lastly, 26 Mile has been called the Marine City Highway. On the 17th of March in 1834, the Township of Macomb was organized by an act of territorial legislature. It was first composed of both Chesterfield and Macomb. But by 1842, it would become territorially independent. The sign you see here has been put on the property previously owned by the Wade's Nursery in Romeo.
Sorry.
Off Plank Road on 23 Mile. The property will now be part of Macomb's recreational areas in the future. Okay, next.
Sorry.
The image taken here is from around 1920.
It's going by itself, okay.
It's showing a number of farmers cleaning the ditches with what was called board scrapers on Hall Road, or also known as Michigan Highway 59, which runs along Harold Miller's farm at Hall Road in Tilge, near where the Macomb Beaumont building is today. We'll further talk about the 3 unincorporated communities within Macomb Township: Waldenberg, Macomb Corners, and Mead, which is shared with Ray Township. This is Daniel Miller. He was born in 1798 in Madison County, New York. In 1880, he married Lucinda Hurlburt, and they relocated to Washington Township, where Daniel spent 10 years working on a farm. Because of his service to the War of 1812, he would receive land grants, which enabled him to purchase 200 acres at Macomb Corners at 25 Mile and Romeo Plank Road, where he resided for the next 30 years. Daniel and Lucinda raised 4 children, and it would be their son Nelson Hurlburt Miller who took over the farm after his mother passed away and his father moved to a new home in Romeo. Daniel did pass away in September of 1889. This same property would pass on to another Daniel Miller, son of Nelson and Caroline Dixon Miller. This Daniel operated a sawmill on a portion of the property for over 60 years until his passing in 1956. William and Emma Penzine purchased the farm in 1911 from the Miller family. This is an image of Marion Maria Miller. This is the daughter of Daniel and Lucinda Miller. She was born in 1828. This gentleman is Noble Robert Sutton. He owns 60 acres on the south side of Romeo Plank Road, off Runyon Road, or 25 Mile. His farm was next door to his neighbor, Daniel Miller. Noble was also a toll gate operator along the Plank Road for a few years. Noble would pass away in Coldwater, Branch County, Michigan in 1892. Marion Miller and Noble Sutton, being neighbors, would naturally find each other's company, and they would be married on October 3rd, 1844. Here's a copy of their marriage license. This is courtesy of a descendant of theirs, Mike Ellis. Moving further south on Romeo Plank Road, we enter Waldenberg, another of the unincorporated communities of Macomb. This family would contribute greatly to the Waldenberg area. George Wilhelm Ludwig Louis Steer, the son of George and Bertha Steer, who brought their family to this area of Macomb Township in 1857 from their home in Germany. Louis married Bertha Ahern at Emmanuel Church in 1878. Louis and Bertha had 7 children and would soon take over the care of the Ahern farm of 40 acres. Louis also started the Steer Hardware in 1903 in an old post office building, a conglomeration of small buildings that were collected and put together to create the entire building. In its heyday, Louis carried everything his customers could possibly think of needing. I had the pleasure of meeting Louis's great-granddaughter, Shelley Steer Henshaw. Her input into this area of Macomb was total and complete in her knowledge, even remembering the stories about the store and her time being there as a small child. Like by the time she was 11 or 12, she could put her hand into a nail bucket and pull out with exactly a pound of nails. Sadly, in 2003, the building would have to be demolished. This gravestone rests in Emmanuel Church Cemetery. There, many of the earliest settlers in Macomb Township have been laid to rest in these area cemeteries, like Emmanuel, St. Peter Lutheran, and the Whitney Cemetery, also called Macomb Center Cemetery, where we will talk a little bit about that cemetery shortly. This image was photographed a little off kilter, as the normal stone is tilting quite far over and starting to become difficult to read. This is the resting place of George Steer that we talked about, the first George Steer who brought his family here to Waldenberg area of Macomb in 1857. The Peters and Caruth General Store sat on the northwest corner of 22 Mile, facing Romeo Plank. And while you might be wondering why mentally you can't picture just where it was, it would be because the store burnt down in 1908. This fire was caused because of the overheated gas lights in the kitchen, located in back of the stairway.
Sorry, Linda, can you pause just for a second? For some reason, the slideshow started making the slides smaller, and I went back to making it bigger. All right, here we are, back here.
Okay.
Thank you.
The owner of this building was August Peters. Mr. Peters and his wife are on the far right in this image. This invoice, dated from November 2nd, 1907, was used when the store was called Caruth and Dopp, general dealers in dry goods, groceries, boots and shoes, crockery and furniture, along with wines, liquors, and cigars. They seem to cover just about all the important things that people would need. Robert Dopp would purchase this property after the original store burned down. In 1909, construction was begun on a new and improved store. This group of workers, taking a break from the construction of this new Dopp building, would include with this group Louis Steer, William Steer, Clarence Steer, and William Trapp, among many others. They are posing for the camera with a sign stating, "Local option enforced." On researching this odd sign, I found a bit more confusion. As described in the 1907 encyclopedia, and for those who might be too young to remember what an encyclopedia was, a book that contained information similar to what's found on Google or Wikipedia today. The local enforced option was described as a license granted to the inhabitants of a district to extinguish or reduce the sale of intoxicants in their midst. My question was, had this become a dry community, or was this just tongue-in-cheek posturing for the photographer? In all my research, I was never able to find that this was a dry community. It just didn't seem to be. The finished Dopp Brothers building with the 1909 listed on the capstone. When finished, the Dopp store included groceries and clothing on the main floor, as well as an area for furniture and sales. There was a Ford automobile sales area on the second floor. Soon the furniture was out and a dance floor came in. With that, the Heidelberg 8, a band, came from Germany and played good German music, which to the satisfaction of all that attended the dance. Robert Dopp sold his interest in the property to Charles Stady, and with that time came for the dance hall to depart, as it became more lucrative for Mr. Stady to remodel the second floor into apartments. Soon tenants from Selfridge Air Force Base found places to live and being convenient. Over the years, this building would go through many transitions and take on many forms. This view is from the 1980s. This is an aerial view of one of the many farms, this one being the Henry Rocker farm that I found for this book. This one was located at 215 Shoemaker Road, or as we remember it today, recognize it as 21 Mile Road. Across from the Burning Tree Golf Course, this is one farm among many that had been passed down from generation to generation, in this instance, in the Rocker family. The home would be demolished and the property sold for development in the early 1990s. This is Kling's Tavern. Although it did not get that name for many years, it was erected in 1874 when Romeo Plank was just that, an old plank road. When many other main roads got wet and muddy, this was one of the first stop to pay the toll needed to get through to Mount Clemens, because the people could always rely on a good road from the Romeo Plank Road. This building over the years has seen a large variety of history. This has been a post office with a dry goods store in the front and a bar in the back. Walter Kling purchased the building in the 1940s, and he named it Kling's Tavern. At that time, in the 1970s, Goldie Michaels, a lady with Mount Clemens ties, became the new part-time owner and operator of the building that would soon be called Goldie's. She was known for acquiring items when needed. At one point, the Road Commission lost some bright yellow road paint that was thought to have fallen off the back of their truck, and soon Goldie's had a new bright color on the outside of their building. In 1977, Goldie's would have new caretakers that still give tender, loving care to this landmark today. When you visit and park your car, you can still see a little bit of the color on the brick that fell off the Road Commission truck many years before. In 1853, early settlers had immigrated from Germany and organized to become the first congregants of the new Emmanuel Lutheran Church. The first area for them to conduct their services was the Ray Barn on Romeo Plank at 21 Mile. As the congregation grew, their first brick building was built in 1866, which stood in the same place as the present structure sits today. Also in 1866, a teacher was installed, and both the school and church would continue to grow. By 1877, the time came to build a new school at 24 Mile and Romeo Plank. All the while, they kept the 21 Mile Road School. At the time, it was felt the distance was too far for the children to manage getting to school. So time came when there would be a sign of the beginnings of a new congregation as an outgrowth of Emmanuel Lutheran. In 1882 and 83, a total of 19 members formed the St. Peter Lutheran Church at 24 Mile and Romeo Plank. Because the area of Waldenberg was growing at a very fast rate, property was purchased for $2.50, and the St. Peter congregation purchased the wooden school from Emmanuel for the whopping price of $5. It would serve as their first church. Plans would begin for a new white frame church that was dedicated in 1882. This church would be warmed by 2 potbelly stoves, and the wood would be cut and donated from local farms in early fall. This is one of my personal favorite images in the book, taken in 1926. This group of young children are from a class at St. Peter Lutheran Church and School. I also came across another image that someone had kindly added all the names right onto the image. When realizing, as I looked over these photographs, these young people were the farm owners of 20 years in the future. The Penzines, the Schofs, Kragers, Eschenbergs, Stadies, Dankers, Schrams, and many others. The young men would go on to be the farmers of the land in Macomb Township, and many of these young ladies would marry, and they would be here to support and in many times work just as hard as their husbands did to support the farming life. This sketch is an exterior view of the farm of John Whitney. Whitney was born in October 25th, 1809 in Ontario County, New York. In 1834, he migrated to Michigan and shortly after purchased a farm then known to be in the wilderness of what was becoming Macomb Township. His property was located on the south side of 24 Mile Road between what we now know as Foss and Card Roads. He married Phoebe Nelson from County Kent, England in 1838. They would have 7 children, 4 daughters and 3 sons. By 1859 survey map, John was the owner of approximately 200 acres, along with his brother Samuel 200 acres across the street on 24 Mile. By 1916, this property for both brothers is now owned by someone other than the Whitneys. John would pass away in 1895, and his youngest son, Courtney, would own the land for just a few more years. There's a small and quaint cemetery that originally was part of the John Whitney farm. Many of the names found on the gravestones there are familiar names of the early settlers of the area, including the Cards, the Eschenbergs, Fosses, Schrams, Stropes, and of course the Whitneys. One of these graves, it lists a little 9-year-old boy, the son of John and Phoebe Whitney. Charles passed away on October 4th in 1865. While researching this Macomb family, it was found that 3 of the Whitney children passed away within a very short time of each other. Mary Rebecca on September 13th, aged 23 years. Florence Gertrude on October 15th, aged 12 years, and their little brother on October 4th. Although it is known that diphtheria was a problem around 1875 in this area, I have not been able to find if there might have been a cause of these deaths of these siblings at the time. But nevertheless, in a month's time, this couple had to bear the loss of 3 of their children. This class photograph from around 1937 from Emmanuel Lutheran School. Some of the familiar names of these young people who became future Macomb Township residents are grown-ups, are the Tillmans, the Steers, Kleinos, Pretzers, Schroeders, Kuchenmeisters, and Blanks. Mr. Hoffman was known to be the teacher. This is the original Macomb Township Hall that was located at 19925 23 Mile Road, built in 1919. This building would serve the community in the same location until 1972. The cost to build this original hall was $1,600. The old hall was sold to a local private buyer and removed from the site after the second township hall was built in 1974. The old hall was moved to the Wade's Nursery site and used as an extra building for many years. Recently, in 2019, Macomb Township purchased the Wade's Nursery property on the east side of Romeo Plank Road, just north of 23 Mile, for recreational and maintenance use in the township. And as the sign now states, Macomb Township is in the center of the county. The old Township Hall was now designated as the building for the Macomb Township Historical Commission, and they worked this past summer to get it into shape again and usable for the public. The commission members and former supervisor Janet Dunn were kind enough to have a book launch for the Macomb Township book on the same weekend as they opened the old/new town hall to the public this past September. While researching this book, I had the pleasure of coming in contact with some really marvelous images and the great and generous people who these images touched. I'm in the process of researching a 3rd book for Arcadia and will encompass the 9 townships that are north of Hall Road on Macomb County and highlighting the farming life of these hardworking farm families. This image and another one similar is in consideration for the cover of the new book because nothing seems to exemplify farming life in our area in a better way. I really thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this talk about Macomb Township, and I thank everyone at the Clinton-Macomb Library for this opportunity to present this evening.
Thank you. That's very interesting. I'm gonna unmute everyone and let everyone talk. Let's see. Oh, okay. You can unmute yourself, I think, many of you now. So if you have some questions that you would like to ask, please go right ahead. Or you can type them into the chat if you would prefer to do that. I'm not hearing anything. I don't know if I've unmuted everyone yet.
Linda, can you hear me?
I sure can.
Oh, okay. I was just kind of wondering how long, how much research, like over a course of 5 or 6 years, did it take to put the book together?
Not as long as you would think. Basically, because you're using the knowledge, you're using the information. When you go out looking for the images, the photographs to use, I also ask for some type of documentation, some sort of information about those images, because some of the things, yes, you do have to do research on, but a good portion of it comes from, the people that these images belong to. A lot of these, the ones that I was able to get from the Mount Clemens Library, I was able to get some from Macomb Township itself, but a lot of them come from the people, and also the church would have them, and they'd have the documentation. So that's kind of where the research comes in. There's not a lot of digging. There was no information about the Whitney farm, so that was something we had to look into and kind of dig up some sort of answers as to, they were a really integral part of when Macomb Township first started, but I had to dig and find some information about them.
Linda, the store that had the name DOP on it, did that later become DOP Furniture in Mount Clemens?
I can't answer. The DOP building is the one that's still there today. Mm-hmm. It was called the DOP because it was the gentleman, Mr. DOP, that was building it, so they called it the DOP building. But whether the people went on to do that, I couldn't really tell you on that.
A similar question in the chat: was the Whitney family in your book related to the Whitney family in Mount Clemens?
Believe it or not, the Whitney family didn't make the cut.
Oh.
These are only 128 pages. At the time, I was not as wanting to put a sketch in the book as much as using the photographs. So I didn't put the Whitney information in the book, to be honest with you. Although it could probably go in the book that's being written now, which is on farming. That may just be a good crossover into the next book.
I'm just going to ask that if you have a TV or radio on, can you please either mute yourself or turn the thing off? Okay, thank you. And I have a hand raised here. Let's see. I'm not sure how to do that. Kathy, you had a question?
Oh, okay, maybe that's me. I have a question about the old township hall that you said now is where the Wade nursery was.
Correct.
Is that, I didn't know anything about that opening up, so is that open to the public to view it?
Well, I think as it is now, it's probably not going to stay open on a 4-season basis. because I don't believe there's heat in it at this point in time. They had just received this back. The township hall had been used basically on the Wade's property as an extra maintenance shed. And they've redone it. They've gotten it out. When we had the book launch, the weather was great in the summer. Well, it was getting to be September, but it was still warm. I am sure that as time goes on, they will be doing more to it to make it maybe a year-round entity for them. It was just really great to see that it could still be used, and what better place to use it than for the Historical Commission.
Yeah.
Because they have a lot of things they need to display, that type of thing. I was really pleased to find out about this. We were going to have this book launch in August, but the building wasn't done. So it was kind of like, if you're gonna want to do this book launch about Macomb Township, let's wait and do it when you can have it with the building also.
Sure.
And regarding older buildings, there is a comment here from Cheryl that her sister lives in one of the Whitney houses. So I guess some of them are still around.
They
And we
may
had a
be-
question about the Atwood School. That was like one of the first schools in Macomb Township. Did you read something about that? Or?
Yes, I do have something in there about the Atwood School. It's up on, if I'm not mistaken, off the top of my head, on North Avenue. I tried to list most of the schools I could come up with. I found that a lot of them, basically Macomb Township has their school system is spread out among a whole bunch of entities. There isn't just one school district of Macomb Township. So they really have spread around, depending on what part of Macomb Township you have in. But I know there is some articles, I'm not remembering it off the top of my head now, but Atwood School there's a picture of it and kind of some basic information in the book.
Oh, so people either have to buy the book or check it out from the library. We'll have a copy in the history section and in the local history section, of course. How about Potato Joe? That ringing a bell? I
Yes,
have a
it does.
comment here. Yeah, it does. What do you know about this? I don't know this potato.
Mr. Penzine, he had a huge farm on 25 Mile and Romeo Plank. I think it continued to grow over the years, and he had great amount of property there. And I think he did an awful lot, from what I was able to find out, in the potato field, to where he was quite well known for it, to where they called him Mr. Potato. The agricultural people that he was associated with. So he also went on to have open, and I'm losing the name of the place off the top of my head here, the golf course that became
Wolverine.
Yeah, well, yeah, he started the Wolverine with Mr. Krieger, but they also went on to do one on 24 Mile. Obviously, I'm not a golfer.
Crackerwood.
That was his, apparently his great love.
So you didn't write the article though about Potato Joe. This person has read an article about him, but was that you who wrote the article about him?
No,
Okay.
that was written by somebody else. In fact, there are numerous articles. In fact, I ran into a situation where I had gone to Cracklewood and asked them if they might have had some photographs or something I could use. And this young man came out to my car and literally handed me this pile of articles. And I was a little taken back, because my first thought is, oh my goodness, you don't know me. And I mean, I'm going to bring them back, but you don't know that I'm going to bring them back. And they were very kind to let me have all these. And I quickly drove over to the 29 and 29 and Van Dyke UPS, where I would get an awful lot of my printing and things I needed done from them. I took all these articles in, and the lady that I'd been dealing with for, months and months and months, doing a lot of copying for me, she looked down, she goes, oh yeah, that must have been my cousin. That was my grandfather's brother. So it gave me a good taste of the fact that everybody is
Related.
intermarried. I mean, I hear this lady, and when I had said to her, oh my goodness, you're kidding. And next thing you know, I was able to get some images from her and some information. And so I ended up taking all those articles back, by the way, that same day. So I would relieve myself of any kind of pressure, but it was very kind of them to do that, or to trust me that I would bring them back. So
this is an interesting one. There is a dilapidated cinder block brick structure on Hall Road east of Tilt Road. Is it part of the original farm?
that I really don't have any information on. No, I
Yeah.
couldn't answer that with any kind of certainty at all. So much has changed along there. There were so many farms along that whole road there. But I mean, it's anybody's guess. I'm sure there's some history behind that for sure, I would think.
This is a little off subject, but back to Potato Joe and someone writing a book about it. And I just wanted to mention to the person who had this question, because they weren't able to find the book, that I recently had a great experience of emailing the Library of Congress. And if you go on the Library of Congress website, right there, there's a Ask a Researcher. And my question was about the original author of a poem, and they put a lot of research into it and answered me within a few days. I've heard it can take longer, but when it takes longer, it sometimes involves other countries. But if it's something in the United States, there are Library of Congress researchers that will actually look this stuff up for you. I mean, we may be able to find it at our level at the library, but if you want a fast answer, I think you might want to try that. It's kind of fun too, research, doing that kind of research.
Oh, digging into things like that is always interesting. Yeah, very much so.
Yeah. Any more questions? Anyone? Okay. Well, we just have a nice comment here. Congratulations on another amazing Images of America book.
Thank
I
you
enjoyed
very
your
much.
talk. And before we started, we were talking about how important it is to preserve these images and these
Oh.
stories, and the stories of these families in our area. And I'm really glad that you did it. And I'm waiting on the Clinton Township book to come out.
Well, it's funny because I had spoken with people who, had witnessed the fact that with these books, saving this information, saving these photographs, a lot of times when we've got younger folks, they're not real interested in the past. They are best off looking for the future. And it isn't until you get a little bit older that you start realizing how important that past is, and how we need to save these items. How when people are not wanting them anymore, pass them on to your local historical society, your local libraries, this type of thing, so that they can be preserved, so that somewhere down the line, it's like the farming history. when I first started this book, I remember seeing something on Facebook where a young man had said something about the fact that he had gone through Macomb Township and it just didn't look anything like what he remembered. It had changed so dramatically. And, you know, we have to have progress. We can't go through, you know, I guess staying still all the time. But I remember writing to him saying that I was doing this book. I felt a little bit overly pushy on this, but I felt like I wanted him to know I said that I was doing this book on Macomb Township and that I hoped he would, when it came out, he would either go to a library or even look through it in the bookstore, whatever, but see if that was the Macomb that he was remembering from his past. That was the whole idea, is the fact that so much has changed, especially in Macomb.
Yes.
As things move out, you know, more north. And Shelby's the same. The farms aren't really there anymore. I mean, you have to have the homes, you have to have the progress, but we need to remember this past and not let the photos and the information get lost in the shuffle of, you know, people's lives.
Yes.
So,
Well, we had a nice comment again, thanking you for this interesting presentation. And the person whose name is Annette mentions that her daughter went to school with your daughter, and her daughter was watching tonight as well.
oh,
So,
my Brittany, okay.
so a young person, yeah, was here. And another one. Very good program. Interesting how less and less open space with new homes is sprouting up instead of farms. Yeah.
Oh, yes,
There'll
very much
be-
so.
This, yeah, Macomb County is definitely growing. And someone did ask if you are doing the Clinton Township book.
No, I'm not, quite
You're
honest.
working on this other one, right? That
I'm
nine
working on
township.
one for that's basically the 9 townships north of Hall Road. I had found that when doing the Macomb one and one that I've done on Washington Township, people would come and say, oh, I would love to have been in the book. And I either didn't find them or they didn't find me. So I decided that I would continue on with the farming aspect of the situation, to where this next book is about the nine townships north of Hall Road, in what would be termed North Macomb County. And they're only 128-page books, so 9 chapters in there. It's not going to be a lot of pages on each township, but at least it'll tell a story of some of the farms that I did miss in the other books. And also it will kind of bring out the stories that are in some of the other townships that don't have books on them, like Bruce, Armada, Lenox, and I'm missing one. And Ray
Ray?
Township, yes. And Ray Township. You know, they feel, I think Arcadia feels that there's not enough population to move forward on a complete book, but they do have stories to be told, whether there's a lot of people like Macomb's 90,000 compared to maybe Bruce's 10,000 or so, but they still have the stories to be told. So this was a way of kind of opening the door for some of these other townships to, hopefully they'll see that, yeah, you know, there is interesting stories there to be told. Maybe they should have their own books also.
Yeah. And so often in history, we focus on the big events, you know, but the lives that real people lived are fascinating and deserve to be remembered. And here's an example in our comments from Cheryl. I have pictures in the Polania Images of America book of my mother's family. It's exciting to see our pictures and memories preserved. And she mentioned that
Yeah.
Seal Jensen wrote that book. And Chris also agreed that much has changed here since 1963, when that person moved here in 1963. So even, since then, a lot has changed.
Well, I moved to the areas I had mentioned in 1980, and I'll live there for 27 years till moving to Washington. And I have to admit, in calling my own ignorance in the fact that I didn't realize, I was much younger, had young children. Again, you're not really thinking about the past. You're more or less, bent on
Yeah.
learning about the future, seeing how the future is going to work. So, I learned greatly about all this stuff. I mean, went through Waldenberg many times a week. My background's in photography, and I absolutely loved the church, Emmanuel Church, to photograph gravestones for some odd reason. But I mean, I never really knew about it. I never really paid attention to when it was really built. And it wasn't until I started getting older that I realized the value of maybe trying to preserve some of this information. That's what I've always liked about the Arcadia books, is the fact that that's what I think these people are trying to do. So,
Yeah. Well, we have a lot of them. So if you're from one of these areas, our local history room is closed right now for browsing, but we can run in there and grab them, and they can be checked out. So if anyone's interested, yeah, they're always fun to look through, and it's not a big time commitment, but you certainly do learn something.
well, I know
I have some historical pictures of my parents and their families. They weren't from Macomb Township or anything. And I'm just afraid that when I'm gone, that these pictures will just be destroyed. And so I was wondering, what do I do with older photos that were taken of, my grandparents and great-grandparents? What do I do with those photos? Because I can't imagine my nieces and nephews are going to do anything with them.
Well, to be honest with you, I think one of the first things you should do is get them scanned, get copies made of them so that you have a digital image of them. By no means getting rid of the originals, not especially of the older photos. This is where sometimes if you can donate them to the libraries, to the genealogical centers, the historical centers of the area where these pictures are from, that's usually your best bet. Because most of these places are bent on preserving their information. I have been absolutely blessed to have made a connection with the Romeo Kezar Library, the community archives there. In fact, their archivist is, she has done all the scanning for the two published books and the one I'm working now, to make sure that they're scanned correctly for what Arcadia requires. And I've seen so much. I volunteered with them for a while a few years ago, doing some research on the historical homes in Romeo. And you see how hard they work at keeping all this memorabilia from people. That would be my best suggestion. I mean, one of the biggest thrills I found is at the community archives at the Kezar. They have all the old Romeo observers. They go back to 1860s, 1865, if I'm getting at it correctly. And they're phenomenal to look through. I can't even begin to tell you. The writing in these newspapers from so long ago, they wrote in a whole different way of the vernacular of how they wrote is so much more interesting than what we read today. But they're preserving these huge books because most of them have been hardbound now to protect them, and they're getting all those scanned. So any place that's going to preserve those photos, that would be my best suggestion.
Someone mentioned the Burton, the Detroit Public Library, Burton Historical Library.
Yes.
Yeah, if it has any kind of Detroit interest. We, in the local history room, we collect yearbooks from our schools in our service area. And we had a few random ones that people had given us that weren't from any of the schools that are really in our service area. And I gave them to other libraries, and people were very happy to have them. So
Yes.
there usually is a home, but you are talking about a historical society. And I definitely second that, scan the photos and get them, into another kind of format that's going to be more stable. When the library reopens fully again, this equipment is not available. We do have a photo scanner available to our resident customers, and it's very quick and easy to use. But you can also have it done for you, probably.
Yes. To me, it is worth having that just as a second option of protection, I guess is the best way to put it. And again, a lot of the young people, when they are younger, again, they're looking for the future. They may not be interested right now, but give them a few years and they may very well be interested in it. And if it's not available to them, then that's all the more problematic for them.
Yeah. Well, I don't see any more questions, and we're almost at 7 o'clock. Some of you probably haven't had even supper yet, so we can close out then if there's no other questions. Thank you so much, Linda. Really enjoyed your talk and the images that you shared with us tonight. Next time you do a book, please think of us, and I'll think of you, and hopefully we'll come back. We might even have you live, and we can do a show on our big screen.
Let's hope we're getting back to that again.
Yes,
somewhere in the near future.
Yeah, I hope we're moving in that direction. You can see I'm not that great with this technology, but we're trying to make it work here.
Thank you very much for listening.
Lots of thank yous coming in to you and for your very interesting presentation.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
Linda.
you.
Yes.
Good job.
Thank you, Linda.
Thank you very much
Thank you.
spending this hour.
Thank you.
It was great.